I wanted to thank Rocky Mountain Military Affairs Society for inviting me here. This is, I will warn you, my first opportunity to give a talk based on this book. So you are, yes.
Always at the cutting edge.
Yes. This will either be absolutely amazing or it will be something that I'll revise and work on and do that. But yeah, this is based on my book, Chaos in the Green Zone, My Time as Iraq War Strategist, which is coming out on April 14th. It is available for pre-order on all your favorite and all your not favorite websites that you might wish to go to. And I have now scheduled a book launch party for April 14th at Ivy Wild at 6 o'clock. So you may see that somewhere, but if you wish to get a copy of the book at that point, and I can sign it and all that kind of stuff. I can autograph it, exactly. And if I know who you are, I can personalize it. And if I don't, you can tell me who you are. But what I'm presenting here today is not, because this is a military affairs group and kind of a history-oriented group, I'm going to be presenting on the lessons I draw from my time more than the book narrative itself. Now, I'm happy to ask questions. I'm hopefully going to leave time for questions that you can ask afterwards about how I did the book and things like that. And I'll talk a little bit about that as I go along. A couple of warnings, though. I have not talked about Iraq in public in a very long time. When I came back from Iraq, one of my colleagues, Darren Jackson, referred to me as Edgy Tom at that point, because apparently I would talk like this very quickly and very much in a monotone, and people can understand what I was saying and all of that. I hope I do not do that. If I do that, throw something at me. They'll probably snap me out of it. There's no young people here. I will. It is all relative. That's a good point. I am going to try very much not to drop into the kind of language you use when you're deployed in a wartime headquarters. I will try. I will make no promises or anything like that. So, with no further ado, I am writing this book as an insider and an outsider. I deployed to Baghdad in 2004. So I was there in the strategy office, in the policy office, basically framing the commander's understanding of what was going on, what was important, what ought to happen, how to understand events, and all that kind of stuff. So this is the book itself, and I guess I wasn't going to talk about the book, but I'm talking a little bit about it at this point, is, it's not lots of interviews with a whole lot of people and all of this and comprehensive history of everything. This is my perspective based on the journal I kept while I was there, along with getting back with colleagues that I had there, some news reports to fill in some of the details. So it's very much as an insider, but it's also as an outsider in a whole lot of ways. Like, look at this. Does that look like someone who is ready to deploy to a war? I don't think so. At least I think this is in Qatar. This is on the way there. We landed a little before midnight, unloaded all of our bags. Little sign there says Baghdad baggage, and waited for a C-130 because I was there on a drug deal with the commander. Is why I was there. He had asked for some volunteers from the Air Force Academy and other places to go to supplement the strategy office, and I volunteered. Which is a foolish thing to do for those who use military experience, but nevertheless, that's what I did. I volunteered to go to war. But I was very much an outsider because I was an Air Force acquisition officer. I did not know much of anything about conducting a war. I didn't conduct wars. And people would ask me when there's a war going on in Panama or in Grenada, well, not Grenada, this was before my time, but in Kosovo or in Bosnia, hey, Tom, are you going to go to the war? Like, no, things had to be really messed up if I'm actually involved in a war. And here I am. So I don't have any operational experience. I didn't fly. I wasn't even an intelligence officer. But I was an academic, which makes me also an outsider to this kind of stuff, because as an academic, I'm a political scientist. That's okay. My specialties were Latin America. And more recently, I've been specializing in the NATO-European Union-US relationship. Not very well related to what we're doing here. And to top that all off, I wasn't exactly a hotshot military officer ready for the top. I had been recently passed over for lieutenant colonel for the second time. And so I basically was going because I volunteered to do this. And I volunteered in part because I thought, well, maybe this is a way to rejuvenate my career. A sense of duty, like I've been in acquisition officer. You don't feel like you're really in the military in acquisition. I've been teaching at the Air Force Academy. You really don't feel like you're in the military when you're teaching at the Air Force Academy. So here's a chance to really do something that was going to be military. It should be fairly safe. I'm at a headquarters unit. You know what? How bad could it possibly be? I was not there because I supported the war. I do want to make that clear. This isn't the place to talk about like what I thought was messed up about the war, but just in brief, it messed up our relationships with our allies. It distracted us from Afghanistan. It wasn't planned out very well. It wasn't really legal in that sense. But nevertheless, we're in a war, and I'm an American. I'm a serviceman. I ought to go to a war and try to have it turn out better than it might otherwise do. If I can do that, if people think I'm worth going there, I'm going to go do that. So that's what I did. I volunteered to do those kinds of things. So this book is based on my own experiences. It also has the advantages as an outsider, as a twice passed over major, that I'm not here to justify anything in particular. A lot of books that are written about the Iraq War are either by journalists who come in, they interview a whole bunch of people, and they don't really know a whole lot on their own. They're just repeating what they've been told. Or they're written by senior people whose concluding chapter is more or less tends to be, if only you had listened to me, everything would have been fine. My book's not like that, okay? It's not like that. This is very raw. This is very honest. This is very open. So let me set the scene for where we were. This was about 10 minutes after I landed in Baghdad International Airport. See, I'm believing this is all going to be super safe because after all, we're winning the war. That's what they're saying in the news. Everything is all perfectly fine. And we go into Baghdad on C-130 that we finally find a seat on. And we're warned that we're going to do hard banking combat turns into Baghdad International Airport to avoid the small arms fire that could shoot us down. And that's about the moment I realized that this maybe wasn't quite going to be as safe as I thought. We check in at the flight shack, literally stepping out the stairs, and there's an explosion because small arms fires hit a fuel depot on the other side of the airport. So welcome to Baghdad, and it went on from there. But this was August 13th of 2004. This is 6 weeks after Paul Bremer returns sovereignty to the Iraqi government. So the Iraq is now ruling itself. We now have a United Nations mandate for the continuing the occupation. I mentioned the war was illegal, basically, but the occupation had been validated now by the United Nations to continue occupying Iraq through a series of elections that would restore democracy, create democracy in an independent Iraq, and everything would be fine. Or so we thought. Violence is still continuing in different parts of Iraq, but we do have plans for setting up these elections, and that's important to remember. Also, part of the context that's important to remember is that an American election campaign is also underway. This is August of 2004. This is George W. Bush's re-election campaign against John Kerry, which you may recall. So, finally, what was I doing? This is what we're going to talk about. This is me in my office on October 28th. Because this is a Thursday night, there was going to be a party. The embassy promoted a Halloween party. And of course, everybody knew about it, including all the bad guys. So about 15 minutes after it started, we were prohibited from going, but we took a whole lot of indirect fire, and they found a bunch of unexplored ordnance fairly close to my trailer. So they evacuated everything. And so we're all hanging out, having a big party in our offices, sleeping on cots for that night. It was a great time. It was one of the best nights I had actually in Iraq. It was a lot of fun. When I was stationed there, the first thing I was assigned to was the policy division, and there I worked on militia disarmament. Basically, how are we going to reintegrate the various independent militias in Iraq, and they're going to disarm their weapons, and they're going to get training into doing something else. After about 3 weeks of doing that, I was reassigned over to the strategy office, where my primary duty was to develop a model for how the first Iraqi election was going to turn out and what that was going to mean for the future of American forces in Iraq. I was, as you'll see as I go through the talk, distracted and doing a whole number of things. That's kind of the through line of the work. I also worked on, well, we'll talk about them as I get there. Otherwise, I'll be repeating myself as we go. But that was the basic work that I did. I am I'm evaluating intelligence. I am looking at the laws. I'm trying to understand open source information, what is going on as the political strategist essentially for the coalition. And my reports go up to my boss, who I don't identify in the book. I just call him Colonel Vortex. Well, we called him we call him Colonel Vortex because it's kind of unclear what happened. Like things would come out of his office and then we'd do a whole bunch of stuff and they'd go back into his office and they'd vanish and then they'd reappear again in some different form, altered form. And it's kind of this weird portal between us and everything else. It was part of the environment in which we were working. It was very strange. But to the 2-star and then up to the commander above that. So I adopted from what I learned 4 lessons. So that's what the focus of this is going to be. And